Kia ora and welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
I'm Sarah Watt.
And I'm William Chen.
And each month at Cinema in Context, we discuss two films, one current and one retrospective, with some connection. It could be the same director, the same actor, or a similar theme. This month we are discussing Decision to Leave, which came out earlier this year, and Vertigo, which came out in 1958. The connection being they're both detective stories from high places.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
nice.
There we go. All right, William, give us an introduction to Decision to Leave.
Alrighty. Pretty straightforward, I would say. Decision to Leave, the latest from the maestro Park Chan-wook, features a detective living in Busan who becomes entangled with the widow of a murder victim he is investigating.
Nice.
You've never been so concise. guys.
But enough about Decision to Leave.
Exactly. Jeremy, tell us about Vertigo.
Vertigo is directed by the great Alfred Hitchcock in glowing VistaVision color, I believe. It's set in San Francisco and it follows a detective called Scotty who has, is it agoraphobia? Acrophobia?
Acro, with a C.
Acro. Because
Yeah.
agro is of open spaces with people, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, crowds. So acrophobia, he has a fear of heights, which he discovers through an opening sequence chasing along the rooftops of San Francisco, that it triggers vertigo, the kind of swirling state of confusion from being on tall heights. He has a old school chum get in touch with him with concerns that his wife is a danger to herself, that she's being possessed by an ancestor, and that he would like him to follow her and see what happens. The film kind of goes through a range of twists and turns, and it's a very strange film to describe. I think it goes places that is not clear from the start, but ultimately all comes to an end. And I guess we'll get into that in our discussion today. Mm-hmm. Please be warned that we'll be spoilering both films, and it's fair to say that both films do have some great little spoilers in there. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't seen either movie, I suggest pausing this episode and coming back to it at a future date. All right, who would like to start us off?
Well, I'm going to start a little bit controversial. The uncontroversial part is, personally, I thought Decision to Leave was as stunning as everybody said that it was, and we can talk a little bit about that. But the controversial part is, I thought Vertigo was terrible.
Oh,
and
Sarah, this is one of the top 10 films of all time.
It's actually been
I
judged
know.
the greatest film of all time.
Wait,
by
what?
some
Yeah,
lists.
yeah.
Oh my
So
goodness.
Sight and Sound, the magazine of the British Film Institute, for whom I worked briefly in 2006 and 2007, Sight and Sound does a top films list every 10 years on the 02, 22, 52, 72, etc. And you're absolutely right. For 50 years, Vertigo was number one. No, I lie. For 50 years, Citizen Kane was
yes.
number one.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, in 2012, Vertigo, which had been creeping up the list, because I was looking at the list last night, made it into the top spot. For me, it's not even in my top 100 films of all time. Like, honestly. And I'm not trying to be arbitrarily controversial. I understand that quite often, and this was definitely the case for me with Citizen Kane, I was able to say, well, I can see why this film was groundbreaking at the time, and why in some aspects of it, it's still an incredible piece of cinema. But I'm afraid there isn't really anything much, apart from the trombone shot, which I think was that innovated in
The dolly zoom?
Vertigo?
Yeah.
That clever sort
Yeah.
of dolly zoom down the stairwell and
Which
whatnot.
they did with the miniature with the camera on its side.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah.
And so apart from that, I just don't know what all the fuss is about.
It was your first time watching it. Was it
Yeah.
your first time watching it, Sarah?
Well, my husband says that we watched it a few years ago, but I don't think so. And maybe I had an amnesiac experience, rather like
character.
poor old Madeline, because I was like, nah. I've seen that running up and down the stairs thing, because I
Yeah.
think, there are certain clips from films,
Yeah.
like Rosebud at the
Yeah.
end of Citizen Kane that you see, But no, I don't remember having seen it properly. So it was your first time
It was
as well,
my first
William?
time, yeah.
Wow.
I watched it with my mum.
Call ourselves cinephiles, eh? Oops. Oh, well, we
This
won't tell
is a shame.
anybody. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I somewhat agree with you, Sarah. This is also with you, Jeremy, in that it is a weird movie. I like where it ends up, which is somewhere that you do not see coming from the very start of the film. Like, you as the audience are taken on a journey. But where the film puts its full stop is so odd and oddly, I guess, insubstantial. It just, my mum and I, we were like, wait, that's it? Wait, what? There's some things I really want to discuss with you guys in terms of the characters and how the characterizations change, which I think is very, very worthy of like top film honors. I think the characterization and the acting in some parts is awesome. But yeah, the overall arc of the plot has some nooks and crannies which seem odd, just very, very odd.
Yeah.
I love it for its oddness. So I don't necessarily disagree with the criticisms because it's a film that for me shouldn't work, and I guess by Sarah's judgment it doesn't. But there's so many things in this that stick with me, and I'm so excited to rewatch them. So that dream sequence that he has in the middle of the movie is so strange and creepy.
When he's in the mental asylum.
Yeah.
When he's in the hospital.
And he's got the shot of Carlota... is it Valdez?
Yes.
You know, he's got the shot of her in between him and the judge, or him between him and his friend at the judging ceremony, whatever that is.
Because that's when he figures it out, right? That's what my interpretation was. Like he starts to understand that there was a second person up in the bell tower.
Oh, right, maybe subconsciously, because the penny doesn't drop until he literally sees the necklace on her chest. But it's just this animated Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, it gave me strong Willy Wonka vibes.
Yeah, yes.
That really shot of Jimmy Stewart's face,
That's right.
illuminated by the Technicolor.
But presumably that Vertigo was the prototype for that, right? And what we're referencing is things we've seen subsequently that evoke Vertigo.
Yeah.
Which is the weird thing about watching a 1958 classic decades after you've already actually grown up with all of the derivations, if you will. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I think the score is just phenomenal. Like, whenever I think of that film and I just think of some of those music beats, I'm just transported instantly to the strange world of what they're trying to paint, the picture they're trying to paint. I've just been to San Francisco for the first time, so coming to it this time, I mean, I felt I biked across the Golden Gate Bridge and went out to Yosemite, and
this is a love letter to the Bay Area.
Yes,
there's so many exterior shots. Like half the movie is Jimmy Stewart driving around town.
And it still feels like that. Like that city feels like
William,
that.
that's back projection. So
wait,
don't be fooled.
It looks so realistic.
I know.
But it was just, that part was really interesting. So, I really love this movie. Similar to Blade Runner, when I first watched Blade Runner, I didn't click with it. But there's something about it that just has got into me. Interestingly, you're saying it's groundbreaking for its time. It wasn't a critical or commercial success. I think Psycho, which we'd make 2 years later, was his much bigger film. But
do you know, I didn't like Psycho much either. The first time I saw it, I don't mean to be like, I think I have freely admitted before, guys, I'm not great for watching a film and figuring stuff out, right? I don't pride myself on being super smart in that regard. But spoilers coming, too bad, because if you haven't seen Psycho by now, too bad. Very early on, I was like, wait a second, that sounds like he's putting a voice on and pretending to be his mum, and then I'm like, no, like that. So, but anyway, sorry.
But yeah, it's interesting, and I think there's something about this movie. The weirdness always kind of fascinates me, and what I was really struck with this time is trying to figure out why it gets its hooks into me beyond just the aesthetic and the soundscape. And I think I was trying to figure out what it was exploring in terms of a man's vision of a woman. Like, the Madeline character is this make-believe character, and then he's got this really amazing best friend Midge, who is clearly, like, she's just a phenomenal person, but she's down to earth, and she's intelligent, she's educated, she's self-sufficient, and he's completely unaware of this opportunity. And then when what's her name, Judy? No, is it Judy? When she comes into the picture, she's sort of a little bit nervous. She's very a real person.
She's more Midge than Madeline until he recreates her.
And then he recreates her. And even when she's Madeline, it's brilliant performance by what's her name?
Kim Novak.
Kim Novak, because she's got this like almost Addams Family Morticia air about her when she's Madeline. And
so she gets to play these two quite different characters.
And even when she's all done up with the blonde hair, she's still Judy. She's not Madeline.
My husband Doug, who we had on this podcast and who manages to his opinions sneak in every now and then, he's seen the film about 5 times, and he said to me that his big problem with the film is the fact that Jimmy Stewart doesn't go for Midge, and Doug says, I'm team Midge. I mean, for goodness sake, you've got this wonderful woman right here. And I would expand on that, Jeremy. And I'm not hyper-feminist, actually. I'm not hyper-feminist by nature, and I'm not inclined to get hyper-feminist about a film that is sort of almost pre-feminist in its conceit and its ideas. But I'm not interested in... I wasn't compelled by the love affair between the married woman with amnesia, or whatever she proposes or pretends to have, and the cop or the detective who's really actually just supposed to be doing a job professionally but falls in love with her anyway. I wasn't compelled by their love. I didn't believe in their conversation that suddenly they were there for one another and Scotty, I can't live with, blah, blah. And then I really don't like... and I appreciate this is how it has to be, the fact that he meets this brunette and goes, I want to craft you into being this blonde, this typical Hitchcockian blonde ice queen type woman. That's not feminism.
That's the point, though, isn't it? That's the point of the movie.
But I don't like watching it.
But I don't think I don't think anyone's supposed to like watching it.
Oh,
right?
good.
Yeah.
Because Jimmy Stewart, I think my favorite thing about the movie watching it is the realization that, the protagonist we've been following throughout an hour of the movie is actually a horrible dude.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's the villain of the piece.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Like, everything he does, I keep thinking, how would this have been received back in 1958? Like, would people be okay with him saying, no, she doesn't want this dress. She wants that suit, the one in the grey.
Yeah,
like,
they would have.
It feels horrific.
But they would have.
Yeah.
But I think the men are the villains because there's also the
husband.
The husband's
Yeah,
horrible.
yeah.
And it made me because I
Because didn't the husband throw his actual wife off
Yeah.
a roof?
After breaking her neck.
yeah
I mean...
yeah. So
Yeah.
I feel like this, Hitchcock there's a lot of dubious stories about Hitchcock and his misogyny or his whatever, but then also his wife was there, right? His wife was there. We know that she was an integral part in directing Psycho.
Right.
And I just wonder, what is this film trying to explore around gender and power?
It seems almost autobiographical in places where he's trying to model these disparate women into his ideal,
Yes.
blonde ice queen.
Right,
Yeah.
because all his protagonists, well, not all, are they? But certainly Hooslam McWhatnot in, Tippi Hedren in The Birds,
Hedren,
but also Hooslam
Janet
McWhatnot,
Leigh.
Janet Leigh, there you go, in Psycho and whatnot. So there's a Hitchcockian
And I
archetype,
think
isn't
just
there?
casting Jimmy Stewart, who is, the nicest guy in America, to be this like obsessive monster is just a stroke of genius.
Oh, right, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
like
Contextually, yes, that's right.
I know Jimmy Stewart from It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
Right? And in that movie, there's certain scenes where a darkness peeks through and it's awesome and terrifying, where he starts getting drunk and lashing out at his wife and his kids. But from the most of the runtime of It's a Wonderful Life, he's just this sad, lovable teddy bear of a man.
Yeah.
And in this, he is dead-eyed through the entire thing. And at the beginning, you're like, okay, it's because of the vertigo. It's because he has a medical issue that he needs to deal with. And then by the end of the movie, that's definitely not it, right? His acrophobia, his vertigo is cured.
Yeah.
But it's his obsession over this in his head, this idealized version of the woman in his head that drives the plot and that leads to horrific events happening.
I think the film would be not feminist if the Midge character wasn't there.
And
But
that is
she's
interesting
such a
to me.
significant part
That's
of the
right.
film. Like, okay, why is she here?
And she's quite obviously a good catch as well.
Yeah. And she's just one of the best characters. She's just such a great character. She's so likable. She helps him. She's got a sense of humor. She's there. She gets what he's doing, and she even sees his pitfalls before himself. There's that wonderful scene where she drives past his house and she says, "What are you up to, Johnny
boy?"
O?"
Yeah.
Like just and her last time we see her is her leaving the asylum institution.
Yeah.
Right,
And kind of really upset and not really sure what to do next. But that's her character arc completed. She has to leave the situation because it's just she can't help.
Too hurtful.
Too hurtful,
The scene that you've just mentioned where she's outside his flat and she sees Kim Novak leaving, I thought, oh, okay, yeah, maybe so this is probably going to get quite good because Midge is probably going to throw that woman off the tower or the balcony and then she can have Jimmy Stewart. And I was quite disappointed that nothing like that happened.
Midge, what have you done?
Right. Did you know, and you probably did. Anyway, you probably know that as much as you say, William, that it's almost maybe autobiographical, well, not autobiographical, but somewhat. It's based on a French novel. It's not Entre les Morts, it's something between deaths or something like that. So technically not his story. However, Hitchcock decided and I love this, Hitchcock decided in order to create suspense, which we know he's really good at, rather than the shock of something happening later, he built in that scene. You remember that scene where brunette Judy almost looks down the lens at us and then remembers her part in the scheme, the running up the tower, the pushing the woman over the edge, etc. And we all go, oh, that's what happened. Well, so that doesn't normally happen in the story. It's a reveal at the end. I do actually like that Hitchcock gives us that, because then, yes, there is suspense while we're waiting for the pennies to drop for Jimmy Stewart. The interesting thing, of course, is that's the one moment in the film, if I'm right, where we're getting someone else's perspective.
Yeah.
Because we don't actually get anyone other than Jimmy's perspective, which is the whole point, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's a mystery, we need to be as in the dark as he is.
We get some of Midge. We do get some of Midge, like that scene outside the house, but it's still focused on him. Right?
Yes, and it's not so much her internal thoughts, if you know what I mean. We're not seeing inside her mind and getting a reveal through. So that's a bit of an unusual choice, and I think that having spoken to Alfred about this, my understanding is that he was a bit conflicted about some of the plot elements of the story himself. He doesn't completely think that it ties together and quite works.
But I think some of my favourite films are a little bit messy, and so there is still space for a bit of ambiguity. You know? So I'm not wholly against that.
Great.
I also thought a lot this viewing about the connection around this whole power dynamic, Jimmy Stewart becoming a monster, his treatment of women, and the concept of vertigo, and the fact that he misses. He's thinking about one danger, right? That she's a danger to herself because she's been possessed by the spirit. But he's missing the fact that this guy that's hired him is going to murder his wife. Like, there's a real danger here. And
but when you say missing it, it's because he doesn't know.
No, I know, but he knows something's up. But his direction his focus is in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And I think there is a thematic connection here with the concept of vertigo in the sense that he's afraid of heights. And it's almost irrational in some sense.
Yeah.
But equally it's not, because heights are dangerous. And we know that 2 people die because of, the first wife was dead already, but 2 people fall off, 3 people if you include the policeman at the start, fall off at great heights.
Which is by far and away, for me, the most exciting part of the film.
Right.
Is that opening,
And again, the music's amazing. The
Bernard Herrmann. Yeah.
It's so good.
So...
Well, should we pivot to our decision to leave?
Yes, because what you just said makes absolutely ties in, of course, which is probably why it was your suggestion, I think, Jeremy, that we pair these films. That in Decision to Leave, you've got a detective who actually, in this instance, is pretty much a good guy. He's not really cheating on his wife. He's trying in a lackluster sort of way to keep his marriage alive at weekends, and he's just committed to the job. But then he loses his focus, or rather his focus is drawn all the way to Tang Wei's character of the unsurprised widow. And then and then he becomes a bit blinkered, doesn't he, and a bit confused about the reality of things. So how did we feel about Decision to Leave?
I loved Decision to Leave. I don't think I'm coming from a unbiased place. Park Chan-wook, every single thing he does is basically my favorite movie of the year. We talked about Handmaiden on this podcast a while back, and I just remember I went to see that with Max, our old co-host Max.
Oh, shout out to Max, one of our first.
Max from year one.
He was the quarter of our cohort until we split to
our
thirds.
podcast cohort.
Cohort,
I remember
podcast.
watching it with Max and kind of the revelations and feeling the energy in the room and just that catharsis was incredible. I don't think Decision to Leave has a similar sort of catharsis as The Handmaiden.
Narratively.
Narratively.
No, I agree.
Or, for example, Old Boy.
Yes.
Or I mean, Stoker's a little arguable. But what it does have is just evidence that this director, is a master of the craft.
Absolutely.
And he is taking you, the audience, along for a ride. It's not a very bloody ride or a very surprising ride, which to me was surprising because I expected something super bloody and super like, what?
Yeah.
But it's almost like Park Chan-wook comfort food, but done so well, like prepared by a Michelin star chef.
You're right about the Michelin star. And now, so as you probably know, director Park won the Best Director gong at Cannes for this film. And I know that I'm not alone in saying that as far as a film goes, as you say, William, narratively, oh yeah, that's all right. But cinematically, holy mackerel. I remember turning to Doug and just going, oh, and this, you could hear this My Cinema gasp at camera shots. And that never happens. I mean, I think I saw camera shots that I didn't even know could be done.
Wait, did people gasp at the shot of the rear view mirror of the car door closing and Tang Wei like coming into view?
It might have been.
It's like, oh my god.
There were various moments where I was like, wait a second, I didn't even think you could do that. Yeah. And I don't even mean just aesthetically beautiful, because to be fair to Vertigo, I think that with the red and the green, good old VistaVision, I think that the art design of Vertigo is very, very beautiful. The art design of Decision to Leave is absolutely second to none. But the whole construction of it, as well as really strong performances and really strong performances, which I did not feel from Kim and Jimmy.
Oh.
Kim and Jimmy, just like in Better Call Saul. I wonder if that's a thing. Anyway, I'll have to Google that.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway.
I agree with you both. Visually, this film was incredible, and there is such a confidence with some of these auteur directors that's just, you're in good hands.
Yeah.
And I felt the Vertigo connection throughout. I mean, The Heights was one thing, but in the detective story, the obsession of him with the lead female character,
The death at the very beginning. The
stalking, the stakeouts.
Yeah, and just the strangeness of it. Like there was some strange story beats, and there was a real shift halfway through the film from the first act to the second, or the first half to the second half, and it ends with the main female lead dying. I do have issues with the script. I wasn't enamored with the story as much as the two of you were. I think the ending was, like you alluded to it with Vertigo, how ridiculous the Judy character's death is. You know, her kind of like fear of the nun and throwing herself out the tower.
That was very...
Well, that was a shock, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a plot device.
My mum turned to me and was like, wait, that was quite a distance to lunge out of the tower.
I noticed that because he steps out onto a ledge after, doesn't he? And I'm like, dude, you could have,
Yeah. And I think equally, kind of her, the main character in Decision to Leave, digging a hole and sitting in it while the waves come in is ridiculous.
No, you see, I thought that was a genius thing because I thought about it while she's doing it, and I thought, she can't climb out of it. She's made it so that she cannot climb out. So she is literally watching herself die, if you get what I mean. It would have been different if she could have.
Poetically, it's lovely. And the shots of him running around the waves was just incredible.
God,
yeah.
But
it also ties back to the whole Raven motif when she buried the Raven with the bucket.
Right.
And how she was always associated with the Raven feathers.
Oh, yes.
I didn't pick that up.
Yeah, nice. That's a nice motif. But I mean, I just turned to my friend at the end, because we both were a little bit like, huh. I turned to her at the end and I said, digging a hole and letting the waves bury you. That old classic way to go.
I thought that was genius. And also, though, the fact that then by the time he gets there, she's covered up and he's running around on top of the
mound
sand.
Around, yeah.
Was she drinking a beer?
She was.
Where did the beer come from?
She had it on her.
It's like the bird. It's like the dove in Blade Runner. It's like, where did the dove come from?
Can I just say, I've been dying to share this. Mm-hmm. So the music that's in that final scene when she's on the beach and she's digging is Mahler. And I know it very, very well, as many people do, because it is the final, very long scene of the Italian film Death in Venice, where Dirk Bogart's character, who has hitherto had an obsession with a young boy, Literally what's it called? An unrequited obsession. And he's old and he's on the beach in Venice, and death in Venice, he dies on a deck chair on the beach to this wonderful strains of Mahler. Cool. Now, that music was playing as she's on the beach, and I'm like, oh, death on the beach again. And so she dies on the beach. And I've been wondering, so I've been Googling and not getting a lot out of it to see whether director Park was like, so.
Because to me, that was a callback to before when she said her husband always listened to Mahler 5 while he was climbing. And he was listening to that while he died.
That's right. And she knew, and you remember in the interrogation when he says, are you shocked? And she says, no, I always anticipated, I'm always worrying that he will die eventually. So yes, okay, interesting.
I did really appreciate how they played with our expectations in terms of, you know, like you said, expecting something bloody. There was that whole scene with the snow on the top of the mountain, and I was like, who's going to die here? This is very... But it was just them expressing their love for each other, and I really appreciated the film.
Well, he thought he was going to die.
Yeah.
He thought she was going to push him.
Yeah. And I just thought that was a really wonderful way to play with our expectations.
And that's suspense. Very, very cleverly done. Absolutely it is.
And I guess, again, links to Vertigo, in that there was supposedly, whether it was well done or not, a real love between Judy and not Jimmy, Scotty.
Yeah.
And so I think it was just really carefully done, and I couldn't help but make connections to the film we did recently with that was referenced in Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I can't remember it right now. With just Something to Love, Letter to Love.
Tony Leung.
Yes.
In the Mood for Love.
In the Mood
yes.
for Love. Yes. Just that sitting with two characters and the emotion being expressed as much through the camera work and their facial expressions and body language as it is through dialogue.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Jeremy. There's a lot of allusions to Vertigo, well, specifically, but also to stuff like In the Mood for Love, the whole like barely touching motif where she gets him to sleep by breathing into his ear, and they're synchronizing their breathing, and it's this
very intimate without any...
Well, it's almost
contact
eroticism, but there's no contact.
That's right.
Amazing stuff. And very, very restrained for Park Chan-wook.
Yes.
Because I would have expected from his previous works for sex, violence, tongues being chopped off and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Live octopi being squeezed into people's mouths.
And the only sex in it, interestingly, because there is something that says sex scenes or something, but the sex scenes are not between him and his true love. They're between him and his wife when he's having those awful flashbacks to the crime scenes and that sort of thing. So that also subverts our expectations, doesn't it? Because you're right, you're expecting it to them to fall into one another's arms, and it becomes some sort of torrid sort of display of passion.
Yeah. And with all the, I guess, expectations, because this, oh my gosh, for both Vertigo and Decision to Leave are, in their heart of hearts, film noir, right? I mean, Decision to Leave is a neo-noir, but it has all the trappings of the detective, the femme fatale, and then the woman walked in kind of thing. But, you expect a lot from this genre, being that there's going to be gunshots and violence and something lurid. But everything that comes, when it does come, is so restrained and controlled. And I think a lot of that stuff also is brought about by the editing.
The editing is amazing.
Those flashes of, I guess they're flash forwards or flashbacks.
Yeah.
But it happens throughout the film where you see, for example, what's his name? Slappy, the gangster guy. And he's holding a pair of scissors to his neck, about to die at the edge of this precipice, and then it just cuts to the detective standing there in a pool of blood, and you see that for about half a second before it cuts back, and that's all you need to know about the situation.
Right. It's incredibly efficient, and I remember thinking, my gosh, the pace of Decision to Leave never lets up. And yet it doesn't feel like a Michael Bay overcut sort of thing at all. It just feels really economical. Boom, boom. We know what's happening. We're feeling stuff. This is extraordinary. Vertigo, oh my gosh, move it along. 2 hours, 8 minutes, blah.
Here's the thing with Vertigo. One of the things I was just laughing at throughout the movie was the fact that Kim Novak just didn't know someone was tailing her for the entire thing. He's driving right behind her.
She does know.
But that's the thing. It's explained in the twist. She knew he was there the whole time. And he was just trying to be sneaky.
He wasn't trying very hard.
Yeah.
He's like right behind her.
I know.
She parks, he drives right up to her car and parks.
And in the gallery, he's like standing in the door. Can I just ask, isn't there a scene later, back to Vertigo, isn't there a scene later on where he's back in the gallery and he's looking at a different blonde woman? Now, is that all his sort of psychosis?
I think I think there's a woman there, but he's just seeing her everywhere, right? He's attributing this fantasy to lots of spaces. He's looking for her lots of spaces, so that when the Judy character comes along, that is her.
I see.
There is some, are we just seeing his projection of this person on, like, are we going to get a reveal that it's a different actor actually, and we're just seeing it through his eyes?
Okay. Just wanted to check on that because.
But in a lot of those scenes, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was Kim Novak, right?
Yes,
and then when he like focuses, it's another actor.
Yeah,
which is such a cool effect.
Yeah. Do you mean in the art gallery?
Or in the restaurant? And
Oh, that's interesting that you thought that, because I was looking and I thought it was somebody made to look like her.
Okay.
But sufficiently far away that we could understand that he's thinking, wait, what is that?
I think in the restaurant it is her.
And then they change it.
And it's a very different person.
Right.
I had not thought of the film noir aspects. I think at the start of Decision to Leave I'd felt that, but I just forgot about it. But you're right, both films kind of follow those tropes. And again, with Vertigo, the Midge character is always, there's always the other the female character that is the better one.
The lady in white.
Yeah, right. And he goes with the femme fatale.
Also, may I just say, in Decision to Leave, an interesting thing tonally is that in the present day, plus in the 3 years later, do you remember how his offsider, who is a male cop in one of them, and I think a female cop in the other.
Oh, she's wonderful.
And they're both quite funny.
Oh, she's
But
wonderful.
they're not so funny that it's oafish or that it undermines the tone of the film, so it doesn't jar.
Yeah,
but
she the country cop, she turns out to be really competent.
Right. And so in a way maybe that's a nod to Midge, because Midge is quite funny. Midge is very dry, and she's got the one line is, oh, well, that's a way to entice a girl, isn't it? And so I wondered, but then again we might be ascribing too much.
Gosh, that scene where they suddenly pulled off the case to go after the case of the missing soft-shell turtles.
Yeah.
Which was amazing.
Yeah.
It's just this weird little tangent
take some,
where his fingers like almost chewed off by a turtle.
Oh,
and of course
it's
the
brilliant.
turtle becomes a thing. Like he takes it home to his wife, and when she leaves him, she takes the turtle as well because it's really expensive. It's up to $3,000.
Yeah.
There's a lot of plot points in Decision to Leave that in the moment I was a little bit confused, but I just kind of let the film take me for the ride. And I appreciate that. Like a similar, like what I said with Vertigo, that not everything coheres, and I kind of like it for that. Yeah, there was when the change happened where there was the gangster beating up I forget her name. Seorei. I was like, I don't quite know what's going on here. We kind of understand as it goes on, but you're like, oh, how far have we been? Where is she? Where is this? How's this going to fit into the story?
I thought she had returned to China because you see like skyscrapers in the background and everything. But yeah, that time shift was really odd because it's a jump cut, right?
Yeah.
And then you see in the corner like 13 months later or whatever.
Was it 3 years?
I think it was a year and a bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Also, there's something that stood out for me with Vertigo this time. When he's following Madeline and he goes into that hotel.
Yes.
And she goes up to the room and then he goes and speaks to the front desk person.
Doesn't make sense.
She's like, oh, she didn't come here. So I'm like, was she in on it? Or was that just to throw the audience? Or
No, I think even Alfred Hitchcock thinks that, when I spoke to him, even he thought that was a little bit confusing and didn't really make sense.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because then her car was gone. Did she jump out the window?
So, but hang on a second. So what's going on here? Is he having hallucinations?
I think it just doesn't make sense, and they've just kept it in the movie because it actually works in the moment, right? It creates a sense of mystery, but when you go back and look at it, it's like,
Was she a ghost or wasn't
But
she?
but is she a ghost or isn't she? I mean, obviously she is real, but also is he? Because he winds up in a psychiatric institution. So is it the beginnings of his losing his mind in a way because he's so focused and so driven and
Can we go back a little bit to Jimmy Stewart, Dopey Detective? Because, man, there's several scenes where he's following Madeline.
Yeah.
And she stops by, is that place, Castle Point by the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
And she is very obviously about to jump into the water. And poor Scotty is just like, what's she doing?
Yeah.
What was that? And then she jumps in, oh my gosh. And it happens again when she wants to climb up the steps. It's like, I have to go alone, Scotty. Well, what the heck do you think she's gonna do?
Yeah, I know.
She's standing there until he realizes, oh no.
Look, I don't mean to be arbitrarily controversial about someone as like lauded as Alfred Hitchcock, but there's bits of direction there in that film that I'm not mad on at all, in terms of performance and in terms of credibility. And one of them, and this is a very small thing, but this is my only platform to complain about it. Right at the very beginning, when he's saved her and taken her to his flat, which of course old Hooslam and whatnot does in Decision to Leave.
Yeah.
He takes it to her thing, and
Which is incredibly inappropriate. It's just very inappropriate.
Of course, and is going to make her in his
her
town
off.
flat and his
and
Vertigo.
Yeah, Vertigo.
Well, welcome to 1958,
That's
Jeremy.
just so-
Here's your red bathrobe. You'll be okay.
It's
She's
so
like, what?
bad. Anyways,
And then
carry
all
on.
she's worried about is, where are my hair clips? It's like, lady, you've woken up naked in some stranger's bed and you don't know how you got there. I think you have more to worry about than where your hairpins are. But anyway, getting back to my big complaint. So he gives her the coffee and they're sitting on the ground on the cushions. And then just as the phone rings, she reaches for her cup and he says, I'll get you more coffee. And it's really clumsily directed. I would have done take 2, take 3, take 4 until they got it right. And I mean that because he puts his hand there and then there's a dreadfully long pause and it's awkward and it's poorly acted and then they cut
You're
to...
right. You're totally right.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude,
Totally
were you
right.
short of time? You could have redone that scene.
You're absolutely right.
Thank you. And that's why I used to teach drama.
Hey, but it's still considered the greatest film of all time.
Wow.
So there you go.
Critics' law.
Yeah.
All right, final thoughts. Where are we at, team?
All right. I appreciated that I finally saw Vertigo. It's fine. Like, I think the ending is still
I
super.
love that. It's fine. Can we get you a t-shirt? Vertigo. It's fine.
7 out of 10. I thought the ending, it was pretty tense, and I liked, following the plot and being taken on these twists and turns until the very, very end where it got pretty silly. Although, again, the build-up of Jimmy Stewart, his character of Scotty becoming more and more violent and obsessed was fascinating, and I had no idea this was what the movie was about, so really appreciate that. The vistas, as you guys have been saying, are awesome. Beautiful. A lot of that stuff looks like oil painting, and I don't know whether it's just the effect of, what was it called, VistaVision?
Yeah, VistaVision.
I suspect a lot of it is oil painting, isn't it? Because it is a lot of backdrop.
Yeah,
Right,
especially
okay.
the tower in that.
In the background of his
Yeah.
apartment?
Yeah, what about...
Images.
No,
but
that's
also-
real. That's a real apartment.
Wait,
That's
what?
the real view. Yeah.
No way.
What?
Yeah, they might have recreated it in a studio, but that's a real apartment.
What?
And it looks to that cigar
Going
looking,
up the hill. the
building.
tower.
And
Wait, so Midge's apartment was a film set?
Midge's apartment. I'm talking about his apartment.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and also there's that wonderful sequence where they're in that hotel, which is a real hotel, and she walks out in that green light of the neon.
Oh.
There's lots of very strange...
Which they directly referenced that in Last Night in Soho, except in red.
Oh, wow.
With the neon hotel sign.
Did you notice the light getting darker as well when they're in the bookstore? There's that
okay.
sequence in the bookstore and
Yes,
it's really
but then the
dark.
light goes on, and I thought maybe it was to signify that evening had come. Because then the light comes, they walk out, and the light goes on bright behind them.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Okay.
it's just some interesting lighting choices.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
Interesting lighting choices.
Richard. Carry on, William.
Decision to Leave, I loved it. Again, it was completely not what I expected from Park Chan-wook. But I appreciated just the steady hand, the feel of, a narrative and some guy who really knows how to tell stories, taking it along for a ride. I don't think we've given enough props to the acting, though. I think both leads, especially Tang Wei, who is... have you guys seen Lust Caution?
Heck yeah.
Yes, I
That's
love
an
that film.
amazing film.
Yeah.
She's the girl in there.
That's Ang Lee.
Yes.
Oh, I love that
Which is
movie.
why also our expectations are subverted, because you think,
Right.
she's been in an incredibly sexy film.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
And she shines in this. And I also love how much of the film is about communication, or the ability to communicate in a different way, being Korean, her very clipped classical Korean,
Yeah.
and then the Mandarin to Korean translation from phone apps. Like, so much of the movie is about these two people trying to connect with this barrier in place, which I thought was beautiful, and I've never seen it done like this before.
Yeah.
The ending, I'll give it to you, Jimmy. It is kind of silly when she went there with the bucket. It's like, oh boy. But I mean, thematically, it makes a lot of sense, and she loves him so much that she wants to sacrifice herself, so that she'll forever be this unsolved case on his wall. Like, there's just this crazy poetic lyricism to the thing.
Yeah.
And of course, the final shots, the shots of nature as well, you guys, like those completely beautiful like compositions of the mountain, of the waves, of the rocks, like holy cow, just the juxtaposition of that and the more, I guess, drab, mundane architecture of rural Korea. Amazing visuals, and just it's such a cool film going experience.
Nice. I enjoyed the visuals of Decision to Leave. I wasn't hugely enamored with it as a film experience. I agree with all of the props you've given around acting and choices, and I really love the use of technology and the way that it... there were a lot of details in the story that relied on your understanding of how these different technologies to work, and I think that was...
The pedometer. The step counter on the old
That's
lady's
right.
phone, which is the key to unlocking the whole thing.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. I mean, there was another plot point that I was a little bit like, huh? But then it kind of made sense. But then I have other questions as well. Like, there's other ways you could have done that. But anyways, I'm not going to race back to watch that movie anytime soon. Watched it at the Rialto, and we have this running joke now, I guess, about the bugs flying around in that cinema.
Oh my gosh.
What is it? Did you have this experience?
Yes. I messaged you guys straight after saying it's like Fly City over here.
Oh yes, but I thought
so many flies.
I thought you meant the flies on the eyeballs in the film.
No, Sarah, this is like 4DX, where there were flies in the film. Looking around, are those oh my god, those are living animals.
Yeah.
So, anyways, it was still a great night at the cinema, and I took one of my good friends with me, and I said, "Do you want to come see this movie?" She had no idea what it was, and we both kind of came out a little bit meh. But hey, still beautifully made. Vertigo, I hear all your criticisms, and I still love the movie. I find it so strange and discordant, and things don't fully cohere, but the characters are wonderful. The dream sequence, the music, the visuals, and to come at it so freshly, they've been in that city, and it still feels like that. That city still feels like that, and going around those streets, it's still like that. And I really, really appreciated that. And I feel like I don't know what the truth is of Hitchcock's treatment of women in the real world, because there's different narratives and there's different voices. I don't know how much of a creep he was. There seems to be quite an awareness of power and gender and sexuality, and I just found it quite interesting. And I don't like this could be a film that we find stories out later, and there was people that were actually taken advantage of and abused, and it might change the way I feel about it, but right now with the information I've got, I find it extremely fascinating. And
I honestly think he was probably just a man of his era, his status. I mean, if you remember the way the Hollywood studios were back in the heady days of the 40s, 50s, and so on, he was a god. The women, of course, had you know how it is when you read you know how the credits go up at the beginning of those sorts of films, and even costume designers and makeup in those days were all men, you know. So and he's English. So I'm not, don't get me wrong, I don't know anything other, and I'm not arbitrarily defending him. I'm just saying I wouldn't be at all surprised if he was just a bit of one of those old-fashioned dudes with attitudes that nowadays we go, well, nah, you know.
Yeah. I find that, have you seen that movie with Helen Mirren where she plays Hitchcock's wife? I think it's called Hitchcock.
Oh, okay.
I think I did see it.
Yeah, it's
a
really
few
interesting.
years ago.
Is that Toby Jones as Hitchcock?
Yeah, and he was unwell, or he has to step out of a lot of the production of Psycho.
Yeah.
That's the story the film tells.
Right.
And that his wife kind of took over that production and really made it happen. And what is true and what isn't true, I guess, is debatable. But what is clear from that movie is that she was a significant force in his creative process.
Right.
That she doesn't get her due.
No.
And so again, with the whole exploration of sexuality in female representation, it makes me wonder how much of it is just on Hitchcock and how much he does have a strong female voice in the mix. Because it feels far more measured than just a misogynist, anti-feminist film.
Sure.
But yeah, there you go. That's Vertigo. I don't know if it deserves the best film of all time, but I definitely love it, and I'm always happy to return to it. And I watched a really high-definition remastering of it that was just beautiful. So there you go. Sarah, what are your final thoughts?
Well, we know how I feel about Vertigo, and I wouldn't see it again. And I found it a little bit turgid in parts. And blah, blah, blah. And the one I keep calling it Death in Venice. It's not. What's it? Decision to Leave. I still stand by the fact that I feel as though her almost going harikari? Obviously that's Japanese, but her burying herself alive to die in such an awful way, I feel is quite was quite stunning at the end of Decision to Leave. I love that I didn't want to see Vertigo particularly. Like William, I'm glad that I was forced to, Jeremy. Thanks. So most definitely that is an important part of my cinema education. But also I was amazed at how many similarities there were between the two films, consciously or otherwise. And we didn't even mention the vibrant wallpaper that's in the big red wallpaper in the restaurant.
Yes.
In Vertigo, compared with the amazing wallpaper in, I think it's his apartment, isn't it? And
his
the
little Busan apartment.
Amazing. Also, then every time you mention Busan, I think, and there wasn't a zombie in sight. I love Train to Busan, but I'm really glad that neither of these films had zombies in them.
Did I tell you my experience of watching Train to Busan? So I think it was last year, actually, at Christmas time, and it was on Netflix, and I was...
It's because we'd banged on about it?
Yeah. I love a good zombie movie, so I put it on.
Got the fam to gather
well,
around?
everybody was out, so the whole family were... I think they'd all gone off to look at the Christmas lights or something, and I was like, I'm too tired.
I want to see some
Too
zombies.
happy. Yeah, that's right. Let's see some death.
And I put it on, and I was about halfway through, and then my parents came home, and my dad came in.
Oh, that's right, you did.
And he was just completely enthralled, and was hooping and hollering, and he didn't have any of the context. He was just so... It was that sequence where they're trying to get onto the... They get off the train and then they have to get back on the train. And
Brilliant.
They're smashing through the glass, and he was jumping out of his chair, and I think he even stood up on his, standing up watching the TV. So it was such a visceral, exciting experience.
So this Busan-based movie, a little more subtle, still some death. And if I remember correctly, doesn't our lead in Decision to Leave also have acrophobia or vertigo?
He has insomnia, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But also, isn't he a little bit like, ooh, I feel a bit awkward being up the top
or
of the...
Or is it she does? Oh, no,
she does. She does.
Oh, I see.
He's okay, like, carrying his partner on his back all the way up the mountain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, she has vertigo, which I feel like is a direct reference.
It felt like there was
Absolutely
a
it is.
strong... there was a lot of... It was conscious, I think, the connection.
I also love how in Decision to Leave, the tables are flipped, right? Because instead of her being the stalkee, she becomes the stalker after the time jump. Which I also feel was a conscious decision to kind of take the Vertigo elements and flip it on its head.
Yeah, nice. So well done, Jeremy. That was a good call. Because it wasn't my choice for a pair up, but I think actually...
Yeah, real cool pairing.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema in Context. If you enjoyed our podcast, then please share it with your film-loving friends. You can listen to Cinema in Context through SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and other great places where podcasts are shared. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, which are great places to let us know what you think of this episode or give us suggestions for future films to discuss and compare. Look out for our next episode in a month's time, which will be our wrap-up of 2022. And until then,
No more mai.